Every day is a great day. I have my faith, my family, and live in the finest country in the world. This is my standard daily mantra, and it comes from my experience as an infantry soldier in combat. There were times that I did not know if I would be alive the next moment, much less see the next sunrise. When you're in those circumstances, what is important in life becomes clearly focused, and that is faith, family, and living in this great nation. Now, I'm going to focus my remarks on my work founding Military Outreach USA to deal with the moral harms borne by our military veterans and their families. But I need you to know before I proceed that I believe with all my heart that we do live in the greatest country in the world, and that the majority of veterans who return from service are the most hardworking, team-oriented, excellent people that there are. Now, as to our country in this time of division, when I entered the Army, there had never been an Asian American general or admiral in our armed forces. I've seen an African American elected president and re-elected. When President Kennedy was elected, that was a big deal in this country. Why? And many young people don't know this today. He was Irish Catholic. Today, that's not an issue. In our country, is our country perfect? Of course not. But we have admitted past wrongs, and we've taken corrective action. At the cost of over 300,000 Union soldiers' lives, we abolished slavery, and no other country has paid such a high price in the history of the world to rectify such a social injustice. I've seen the integration of our armed forces and our schools, providing social and educational opportunities denied to previous minorities. I've seen the canceling of real estate redlining practices and repeal of anti-interracial marriage laws. We have lost an additional 700,000 members of our armed forces serving our country, with the vast majority fighting overseas to defend the freedoms of our allies. And we did not do this to expand an empire. The only land we received in those countries were to bury our fallen. And when there's a huge disaster, either natural or man-made, anywhere in the world, who shows up voluntarily with medical assistance, food, and equipment? The answer, the United States of America. We have every reason to be proud of the exceptionalism and accomplishments of our nation, and the proof is in the pudding. There are hundreds of millions of people worldwide wanting to come to this country versus the minuscule few who say they want to leave, and I'm still waiting for them to buy their tickets. Now, tomorrow, we will be observing Veterans Day to recognize and be thankful that so many have given so much to keep alive our heritage of democracy and freedom. We need only to look at any coin produced in this country to see the three principles at stake. Number one, in God we trust. Number two, liberty. And number three, e pluribus unum, or out of many one. These are the foundations upon which our nation has thrived and prospered through the blessings of our Creator. These are the principles that have and still today attract millions of immigrants to our shores as the beacon of freedom and opportunity. This is what has motivated our generations of service members to voluntarily answer the call to the colors. Now, as we look back and feel pride and patriotism, we must also look to caring for those today who have served. And for many, the war goes on. and I have spent the last years of my life trying to serve them. The suicide rate today among our military and veterans is epidemic, with over 22 per day dying by suicide. And the invisible wounds especially are complex, with numerous physical, psychological, social, and spiritual adverse effects. Now, the most well-known of these wounds are post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, TBI, and military sexual trauma, MST. But one of the most serious, yet little publicized, of the invisible wounds is a condition called moral injury. Most of the public, and frankly some healthcare professionals, are not familiar with this term and its implications. It is a major factor in the alarmingly high rate of suicide among our military and veterans. Now, the concept of moral injury is so intuitive that you'll understand it within 30 seconds. From the time you're born until you're 18 years old, you develop a personal moral code, a sense of right or wrong. That could come from your family, religion, friends, or community. Whatever the source, you develop a personal moral code. Then you join the military, and you learn a warrior code. That code is superimposed upon your personal moral code and in fact transforms it somewhat. It might be similar to what Ruth faced, having to make a decision she didn't want to in our Old Testament reading today. Military men and women may have to participate in activities or operations that violate your personal moral code, such as killing. You don't have to be the person that pulls the trigger. You could be a witness, or you could feel you should have prevented it. Or you could be in a unit that follows another unit, and you see that innocent civilians have been killed, or you handle body parts. At that time, you sustain a so-called invisible wound of war, moral injury. It's not a physical wound. You can't see it. But military operations are constantly moving, and you don't have time to stop and think about it. So what do? You bury it. You suppress it. And it becomes unresolved grief and shame. Then you return to the States, often to a civilian community such as Evanston that does not understand the military culture or the issues that you are facing, and the moral injury bubbles up to the surface. Unless you have a strong coping mechanism for that or a strong support system, bad stuff happens. Anger, despair, depression, and suicide. You may not sleep easy, as our psalm reads. You see, those with moral injury often feel that they have participated in such bad things that they have no personal worth, are not worthy of love, that no one can love them, that God doesn't love them. That is why many veterans do not talk about their war experiences. They are fearful that they will lose the respect of their loved ones, and at the same time desire to shield their loved ones from having to feel the moral injury themselves. Many veterans also feel that civilians can never understand because they did not experience it. And it is the position of Military Outreach USA, a faith-based nonprofit that I founded over a decade ago, is that the main approach to dealing with moral injury is not prescription drugs, but rather the forgiveness of a moral authority, a loving God, the counseling of clergy and sensitive therapists, and the support of family, fellow veterans, and a spiritual community offering hope and help. And moral injury is nothing new. In the Bible, in the book of Numbers, chapter 31, when the Israeli warriors returned from defeating the Midianites, Moses greets them outside of the camp, but he will not let them re-enter the camp until they go through a purification process. The knights, upon return from the Crusades, were not permitted to participate in the holy sacraments until they went through penance and reconciliation. Our Native American culture has had community sweat lodges and ceremonies for returning warriors. So society is known for millennia that if you send people into war, you have to help them reintegrate when they return. Our so-called modern society has forgotten that. Now, King David provided the words to help prepare not only warriors, but all of us in life with the familiar, inspiring words of the 23rd Psalm. Quote, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." These words have resonated with me throughout my life struggles and tribulations. When I was in combat, I never worried about my personal safety because I knew that God was with me, and if I were to be taken from this earth, I knew I would be in a better place. What kept me awake at night was my duty as a leader, because my decisions would affect my most precious responsibility bestowed to me as a commander, the lives of those entrusted to me. Now, I'd like to relate a personal incident regarding moral injury. It was when I commanded an infantry company in Vietnam in 1969. We had just had a battle with the Viet Cong and killed many enemies. In fact, there were 3 dead bodies at my feet. Now, the time when a unit is most vulnerable is right after a victory. It's just human nature to let your guard down and breathe a sigh of relief. Now, I was the guy in charge, I was the professional, and I knew that. So it was incumbent upon me to get my men refocused. So I was on my radio barking orders out to my platoon leaders, telling them to redistribute ammunition, take care of your wounded, look for enemy avenues of approach for a counterattack. Then suddenly, in the midst of all this stuff going on, I stopped. I looked at the bodies at my feet and realized that something had happened to me. Something had hardened my heart. Only moments earlier, these were live human beings. They were children of God. They had families and loved ones. And yet, I was treating them like they were bumps on a log. I then thought about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he told us to pray for our enemies. So I did. I said a prayer for the 3 Viet Cong and their families. Now, I didn't have a big ceremony and get on my hands and knees. All of this took place in my head in probably just a minute, but it has always remained in my heart and mind. And I know I was praying for myself as well. Now, the healing process for moral injury basically involves 3 stages. First, as with any complex invisible wound, the individual has to understand the condition he or she has. I can't tell you how many times veterans have come up to me after a presentation and thanked me, often with tears in their eyes, because they had been told they had PTSD. but they knew that was not their main problem. So it's like a light bulb went off. So now they can move to the second healing stage, which is to seek and receive forgiveness. This can come from clergy or working with sensitive therapists. This stage is complicated, and it can be resolved in a short time or require extensive effort and time to resolve. And the final stage is to rebuild the lost sense of self-worth I mentioned earlier. And one of the best ways to rebuild that lost sense of self-worth is by serving others. And what best institution do we have in our society that provides serving opportunities but our houses of worship? Accordingly, over a decade ago, I founded Military Outreach USA, a nonprofit serving opportunities to help our veterans and their families. Now, we are educating the public about moral injury. We published 2 books, one in 2015, that's almost 10 years ago. That is one of the most comprehensive publications on moral injury. The title of the book is They Don't Receive Purple Hearts. It's on our website at militaryoutreachusa.org and can be downloaded free of charge. We have a tab that says resources. The second is a book I authored and released last year, and it's available on Amazon, entitled Faith, Family, and Flag: Memoirs of an Unlikely American Samurai Crusader. Now, my wife and I do not keep any proceeds from the sale of the book. These are split evenly between Military Outreach USA and our local church in Glenview. So the challenge is to keep our guard up and our forces strong. We want to be strong because it still remains the best path to peace. For me, peace is not defined as the absence of war. It is the absence of fear. And the scriptural model of Military Outreach USA reflects that in the book of John, chapter 14, verse 27, when Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." There was an event that enabled this scripture to encourage me through personal adversity. It occurred about 12 years ago. I am a victim and survivor of Agent Orange, a chemical defoliant used in Vietnam to kill plants that the enemy used to hide in so they could ambush us. From it, I have had a heart attack, diabetes, and my kidneys failed. I had to undergo dialysis, and I was blessed with a donor only 4 months later, which is unusually fast. My donor was our daughter, but she is not our biological daughter. We adopted her 30 years earlier, and yet she was a match. We always told her she was a specially chosen child by God for us. But as always, God's plan was indeed special. You can therefore see from my life's trials how my faith has truly given me a peace of mind, gratefulness, and joy that resulted in my daily mantra. If you know of any veteran having difficulty at this time, please reach out to them. Let them know your appreciation for their honorable service. Encourage them to call the Veterans Crisis Line at 988. That's 988, and press 1. God has enabled me at this time in history to answer His calling to serve our military through Military Outreach USA. That is my widow's mite. The good Lord encourages me every day of my life. My time with you here this morning at St. Luke's is just such an encouragement. Truly, every day is a great day. I have my faith, my family, and live in the finest country in the world. Thank you.